Hello, hello. Welcome, friends. My name is Lynn, and today I will be flipping the October 2024 Spellbinders Club Kits. I'll be crafting with the clear stamp of the month, the 3D embossing folder of the month, the better press of the month, and the small dies and large dies of the month. Now, as per usual for my flip videos, I'll be making at least one flat, one layered, one interactive, and one pop-up card. I want to show a quick preview of all four cards so that you can see what I'll be making. And because my flip videos do tend to be on the long side, I'm going to timestamp this video. So if there's a particular card you want to see me make, you can just hover over that timeline and skip straight to that one card. Now let's make these. Okay, so let's get started with my flat card. And generally this doesn't happen, but my flat card was actually the very first card that I made. And that's because when I saw these stamped images, I really wanted to color them in, and I like coloring with my color pencils onto craft color cardstock. I really like the look of that, especially for the holidays. I like doing white monochromatic coloring onto craft color cardstock. You've probably seen me, if you've been watching me for long enough, make a similar card. I think with a Spellbinders stamp set with, I think they had one with a lot of snowmen, and I think I did a set of cards that was very, very similar to this. What I did here to start is I stamped my image and the sentiment with a white pigment ink. And because pigment inks are sticky, they take a little bit of time to dry, I poured some white fine detail embossing powder on top of just the sentiment. I didn't pour any of that onto the image. I only poured it onto the sentiment. That way, when I heat the embossing powder up to melt it, it's very, very opaque, nice and bright white, and very legible. So I love that, and I intentionally wanted to leave the stamped image a little bit less opaque, and that way I can do a little bit of a no-line coloring look. I'm just gonna color with white, and it did take me a long time to finish the coloring. I had to speed up this portion by 20 times because I'm a slow colorist, and I didn't even have to color everything in because I'm just selecting certain areas to color, and I'm trying to leave some areas not colored in and some areas colored in white. That way you can kind of see one against the other. And because if there's two areas that are colored in white, it makes it very hard to kind of distinguish them. But that's why I brought out my white gel pen, not to add, highlights or, that shine, but more, I actually use my white gel pen to color in portions of the line where the stamp originally was. And that way it helps to bring back some of that definition, because as I was coloring, those lines started to get lost, and it was hard to tell like where the scarf begins and ends versus where the head begins and ends. So the white gel pen really helps to brighten out some of those lines and then give a little bit more definition and distinction to all of the various parts. So that's my flat card. Really love how that one turned out. Next, I've got my layered card, and this is one that is actually pretty simple, quick to make. And I think this is a good one if you need to sell cards at a craft fair and you need to make a lot of them. I feel like this is one that is nice and very classic and clean and simple, so it wouldn't take a lot of time to make these and make a lot of them. But I think they pack a punch because these 3D embossing folders are amazing in general, but this one in particular I feel is gorgeous. It's so festive and beautiful. And I brought out some of my gold mirror cardstock. So anytime you're crafting with specialty cardstock, it really elevates a card and it makes it a little bit extra special. So I think that's another thing that while the card itself is pretty simple, the fact that you're bringing out some mirror cardstock or some specialty cardstock helps to make it a little bit more unique. And what I aimed to do was emboss the smaller gold panel in about the same, like the center of where I embossed the green panel. I'm probably not 100%, centered with that, but that's why I added a black cardstock behind that gold panel so that if it's off, you're not going to really know because you've got that solid black border all the way around. So it's going to be really hard to tell that the embossed pattern isn't 100% continuous from between the gold and the green panel. But the illusion works because it's close enough. So I love that look, and you could do this in a lot of different colorways and get a lot of different looks. I think if you're making cards to sell or to donate, I know a lot of people donate cards, Christmas cards this time of year as well. So this is one where I think it's going to be pretty easy and quick to put together, but it's going to be a nice, effective, and beautiful card. Because besides these few couple of layers, all I'm going to do is add one of the sentiments from the Better Press of the month, which is great. It's got one of those press plates where you get all 5 sentiments in one pass, and then there's a single die that cuts out all 5 sentiments. So I love press plates, stamps, glimmer plates, etc. that are quick and easy way to get all of your sentiments in one pass. And I'm just going to put a little bit of 3D glue gel behind this because I'm attaching it onto the 3D embossed panel, which it's got some areas that are raised, some areas that are lower. That gel just helps to keep everything nice and level. Okay, so now onto my interactive card. And for this card, I'll be featuring the small die of the month, which has this really adorable polar bear that's wearing a this really it looks like a very snuggly sweater. I love it. And what I'm gonna make as the interactive mechanism is it's essentially what a double slider mechanism would be. I'm using it more as a reverse slider, meaning I'm gonna pull on the tab in one direction downward, and what I want to actually do the moving is something that moves in the opposite direction that I'm pulling. So instead of like pulling something and having it reveal as you pull it in the direction that you're pulling it, I'm going to pull on a tab and have pull downward on a tab and have the little penguin pop up. So moving in the opposite direction that I'm pulling. So assembling these characters really super easy. I'm loving the fact that Spellbinders has these additional dies that help you to get that little bit of black cardstock behind the eyes. I just really appreciate that. I know it's easy enough to do with just a bit of scrap, but I love that they include it, and it took me a while of kind of staring at the die and the shape of the die to figure out what that was for. But once I figured it out, I was like thrilled by it. And so love all of that detail that they've added. And the polar bear, you can see how big he is. He's nice. This is on an A2 size card, and this polar bear takes up a good portion of that card. So I'm not going to need much else. And all I'm gonna do is add some mats and layers behind this polar bear. So I've got a bit of pattern paper this is from Rosie's Studios, which is the Oh Joyful Day collection. And I believe it's still available. Last time I checked, it was still available on the Spellbinders website. And so, one of the things I love about that collection is that they have, along with sort of your traditional Christmas colors like your reds and your greens and your golds, they also have some teals mixed in there. So, really loving that. And I thought that would be a good, this small little dainty polka dot pattern is just really lovely. So, I'm going to have this cut down and we'll start building our card up. So, that's a little bit of a dry fit of how my card's going to look. Now, for the interactive mechanism, I'm doing this on the fly, so I don't have exact measurements, but I started by cutting this bit of scrap paper to 1.5 inches wide. And in terms of the height of this, I really just put it on top of my polar bear, and I just want it to be hidden by the polar bear. So the height is just whatever it needs to be in order to be completely hidden by the polar bear. And so you can kind of see how that looks there. And I'm going to, as with most things, just kind of talk about, how the mechanism works in concept, and that way you can adapt it to whatever is being featured on your card. That way you can kind of change it to the size that you need it to be. And that's the beauty of making these mechanisms by hand as opposed to finding a die set, because if you're using dies to cut this, then you're kind of limited to whatever the die happen to be sized for. But if you understand kind of the mechanism and how to put the pieces together yourself, then you can make it for whatever size you'd like. So then all I've done is just cut myself 4 strips that are 1/4 of an inch wide. And in terms of the height of them, they need to be taller than that initial bit of cardstock that we started with. And then I've got some soft plastic that I will use as what I'm going to call the conveyor belt. That's essentially what we're going to be creating. So with those 1/4 inch strips, I'm going to glue them to the long edges of my interactive piece here to create basically an I-beam is how I like to describe it. And basically all you're looking to do here is to create a track where you can loop your conveyor belt on this track. And so I'm going to wrap this soft plastic. And I say soft plastic because I find the plastic that works best is the sort of plastic that, like if you crumple it in your hand, it doesn't have a crinkly sound to it. It's actually softer than one of your stiffer plastics. And so I've just cut that down to length. It just needs to be long enough so that you can wrap it around your mechanism, and then you can just tape the loop closed. And one of the things that you want to take note of is you don't want to wrap this so tightly. And you want to keep it in between that track that we've created, because those 2 side pieces, they were there so that basically there's like 2 rails that keep this conveyor belt in the center here. And I just added a bit of extra cardstock just to make sure that I wasn't wrapping this too tightly, because if you add something with a little bit of extra thickness, it just helps you to ensure that you don't wrap that plastic too tightly around the center of your mechanism. And the reason for that is because if you wrap it too tightly, it's going to be really hard to move because I'm going to attach a pull tab to this conveyor belt so that as you pull the tab, which will get attached to the front of the conveyor belt, that's going to move in one direction, which forces anything that's attached to the back of the conveyor belt to move in the opposite direction because they're connected with that looped band. So when one part goes down, the other part goes up. When one part goes up, the other part goes down. And that's basically your standard double slider mechanism. I've got another bit of scrap cardstock here that is going to be my pull tab. I definitely recommend for these mechanism pieces thicker, like a nice heavyweight cardstock, especially the pull tab. And if you don't have a heavyweight cardstock, then for the pull tab especially, maybe double up on your cardstock. I'm using 120 pound and it's a good weight that such that when you pull on it, it doesn't feel flimsy. And that's what you need. You need something that feels a little bit substantial so that when you pull on it, it's not going to bend on you and wrinkle on you. You want it to be stiff and be sturdy so that it can really pull that conveyor belt. And I've also cut myself some clear acetate. I used a nice thick construction weight acetate because that's the thing that's going to pop up. And all I've done is put just one little line of adhesive along the one end of the pull tab. I rotated my conveyor belt so that it's as far up, the conveyor belt mechanism as it will go. And that's where I attached the end of the pull tab. And that's basically the starting position, essentially. And that way there's room for that to move downwards because that's the direction the pull tab needs to go. So starting position would be as far as you can place the conveyor belt so that there you maximize the amount of room that you can actually pull that mechanism downward. And I thought because this polar bear is so big, he takes up so much space, and I added so many mats and layers with the pattern paper and the solid color cardstock. Really the only space I had left for his sentiment was right on his sweater, but I think that works fine. It works perfect. Um, and it looks really super cute too. I actually really love the font in this stamp set. It's got a very handwritten casual look to it, so I really love it. Okay, so now we basically have all of our pieces we can start to glue and start to put things down. And what you want to do is if you have something like a low profile foam, I would add low profile foam. But if you don't have it, you can just cut yourself a couple of extra of those 1/4 inch strips. That's just to give a little bit of dimension so that there's enough room for the pull tab and it's not being held down too tightly against the card base so that there's room, or against the in this case the pull tab's going to be right immediately behind the polar bear. It's just to give it a little bit of extra room. So that's why I like to use my low profile foam. It's only about 1 millimeter thick, so that I'm not adding a ton of thickness to the overall card, but it's just enough to give it some space. And then what I want to do is I want to position this behind my polar bear so that that mechanism's completely hidden. And then I glued my acetate with some dry adhesive to the back of the mechanism. So that's on the opposite side of my pull tab. So that way, when my pull tab is being pulled downward, the acetate, which is attached to the backside of the conveyor belt, that is going to move upwards in the opposite direction. And that's how we get a reverse pull tab. And so instead of, you could do this as a regular slider where you pull the penguin upwards, but I just think it's kind of fun to pull on a pull tab and have the penguin jump up. And that way you see the full effect, because otherwise you'd have to be holding on to the penguin to pull him upward. And so sometimes it's nice to just do these reverse pull tabs so that you can see the full effect of the object moving. So I've just added some liquid adhesive to just those rails, just the foam strip, because you want to be certain that you don't have any adhesive or anything that blocks the movement of the pull tab. That's why you always see me pulling on it, because I'm always double checking that it can move freely. And then I want to do some dry fitting. So I just want to position my penguin where I think I want him to end up and where I want him to start. Kind of depends on, what look you're going for. So I want the penguin to just be barely peeking up. And in this case, he doesn't have room to be completely hidden behind the polar bear. If you wanted him to be completely hidden behind the polar bear, you'd have to make your slider mechanism a little bit shorter so that there's space for the penguin to actually fit behind the polar bear. But I want him to still be kind of peeking up, and then he can just jump up even more when you pull on the pull tab. And but you could definitely do this. I think it would be really cute if the penguin was completely hidden and he's a complete surprise. I think that would be kind of sweet, and maybe I'll do a version like that too, because now that I think about it, I think that would be really, really cute. So I didn't think about that when I started making my double slider mechanism, so I didn't leave room for the penguin. But now that I'm recording this voiceover, I'm actually falling in love with that idea a little bit. So I might do this again, and so maybe you'll see on my socials a second version of this where the penguin's completely hidden by the polar bear, and it's when you pull on it that you see him for the first time. But we're going to move forward on this card, and all I've done is added some of my regular foam. So this is my double thick foam, and I've put that on the polar bear itself, just so that there's more area behind this polar bear that gets attached to the card base. But you don't want to put any adhesive anywhere that there's objects that need to move, because if you obstruct any of that movement, then you're not going to have the effect that you're going for. So here I've pushed my pull tab up all the way, so this is the starting position, and I want to position my penguin so that he's just peeking up a little bit above the polar bear's head. And whatever little excess of the acetate I have, I'm just going to snip that off so that you don't see that behind the penguin. Just helps to sell the illusion a little. And then when you pull it up, he pops up. So super cute, really, really fun card. Okay, so now we are on to my last card. This is going to be my pop-up card. And here I'm going to use the large die of the month, and I kind of switched gears a little bit about halfway through making this card. So I started by putting together these Santa heads, which also for the face, there is a die that you can place behind the eyes to give the black eyes. And assembling Santa is pretty easy. I always love that the Spellbinders dies. There's one layer that's sort of the foundation layer that you're gonna layer on top of or build on top of, and it always has deboss lines so that you know where to position the layer that goes on top of that. And I find that really helpful because when you're looking at a die set, you might not immediately be able to tell exactly what pieces go with what, especially because on a die set like this, I mean, look at how many dies you get. There's so many different characters you can create. You can create a reindeer, you can create a penguin, you can create bunnies. And the idea is that these can be assembled so that you can have characters on these little slippers, which I think is really adorable. And I love that there are some Christmas ones. Um, but the fact that they included the bunny slippers, I think is adorable. And there's one that's like, I think like dragon, you know, claws on there. And so really, really fabulous, really, really fun. There's also dies that you can use to cut out the little leggings or the pants and the leg itself and the slipper. They think of everything. There's even the piece that's like kind of the inside back of the slipper that you can glue behind the leg piece so that your slippers, they actually look realistic. It looks like the feet are actually inside the slippers. So that's how it's meant to look. You're meant to create these cute little slippers. Now on the legs, I actually created that with washi glitter washi tape, and I just did a mix match of alternating silver and blue. And I don't know why, I just thought it would be funny to have the stripes be alternating. So that's what I did. And I tried to find inks that are sort of in the same vibe as that glitter washi that I used on the legs. So I pulled out some of my blues, and this is a really cool Brilliance ink, which has it's called Starlight Silver, and it's a pigment ink, and it's got a little bit of shine to it. It's a little bit metallic, which I think is really cool. Now here's when things started to take a bit of a turn. I like to keep the front of my pop-up cards pretty simple, and my intention was I did use the Better Press of the Month to create this plaid, which I love, by the way. Really, really fun to create your own plaid patterns. And all I was going to do was add a sentiment to it and call it good. But I felt like that was a little bit too plain, and I wanted to add something additional. And I was looking at all of the die sets, and it seemed like that small little penguin was just the right size because I could still add the penguin to the left of the sentiment and still be able to keep that fishtail banner on the warm winter wishes. And so I went with the penguin, but then having Santa on the inside didn't quite make as much sense anymore. And so I decided to switch out the Santa slippers for some penguin slippers. So I assembled the penguin instead. Now, on the penguin, you could leave him kind of like he is now, or you could actually add some earmuffs to him if you wanted, and then he kind of looks like the stamped image penguin from the clear stamp of the month because that one's also wearing earmuffs. I think it's really cute how well all of the club kids are coordinated this month. So pretty fun. And I'm going to get the small baby penguin on the outside of the card first. And that way, the front of the card is nice and set and is easy to kind of burnish anything that needs to get burnished before the inside and the pop-up mechanism on the inside of the card makes it too uneven and bulky. So now to the fun part. The inside, I'm gonna start with, this is just some scrap cardstock. It's actually from Rosie's studio as well, but not a Christmas collection. I just like it because, well, it's green, so it's a little bit holiday, but it kind of looks like it could be a fancy rug. So, because the whole idea is that these legs are kind of standing up, I wanted the bottom, which is really the back of your card, to look like it's a rug. It could also pass as wallpaper too, but I'm not gonna actually put anything on the upper portion of the pop-up because the legs actually take up a good amount of space. I mean, I really love the scale of these die sets, both the large die of the month and the small die of the month, because when you're done assembling them, they're pretty substantial as focal images on your card. So you don't need too much more than just that. So I'm doing a little bit of a dry fit to figure out how I want this pop-up mechanism to go. And basically, I just want to add a little bit of dimension to these little characters so that they're kind of out in front a little, just like they would be if you were actually wearing slippers, right? Because the front of your slippers would be a little bit further from where your leg is. Now, this pop-up mechanism that I have is in white, and that's going to break the illusion quite a bit. So I'm actually going to cut another pop-up mechanism from the same gray cardstock that I used for my slippers. And I'm actually not going to use my Santas on this card. So I've started with a strip that's 3/4 of an inch wide, and that's really governed by the width of the slipper because this kind of needs to be hidden by, especially the front piece of the slipper, but really both. And then I'm gonna score at 1 1/4, 1 3/4 of an inch, 3 inches, and then I'm going to cut this at 3 1/2. So this measures 3 1/2 inches long. And along that 3 1/2 inch edge, score at 1 1/4, 1 3/4, 3 inches. And that's all you need. So essentially, this is your basic pop-up mechanism. And whenever you're making your pop-up mechanism, there's really two dimensions that you need to decide on. The first is, how tall should it be? So, how much height do you want it from the bottom of your card when you open this up? And how tall this is, or at least how tall it can be, is going to be governed by the penguin head or the penguin face, because the pop-up mechanism needs to be hidden behind that penguin face, and or at least it's ideal for it to be completely hidden. That way it doesn't break the illusion. And so I've just cut an extra piece of my slipper here, and then I'm gonna trim this part off so that I just have, basically the front of the slipper. And I'm gonna glue my penguin head to this. And this happens to be just slightly taller than 1.25 inches. So that's how I arrived at that first measurement of 1.25 inches. Now, the second dimension that you need to decide on when you're making this simple pop-up mechanism is how far forward from the back of your card do you want your whatever it is you're popping up, how far forward do you want that to be? And in this case, I don't want it to be too far forward because I want it to still look like it's part of the foot, part of, the slipper. And so that's why I went with 1/2 inch. And I considered doing even less than that, maybe 3/8 of an inch, but I thought it would just be easier to do the math if it was 1/2 inch. So that's basically how I arrived at that. So I've got my legs attached to the back here, and that's the back of basically the back of the front of our card. And now I'm gonna glue my pop-up mechanism down. So I'm gonna start with the 1/2 inch glue tab, because once you get those two dimensions, you basically score your lines at those dimensions, but you alternate them. So in this case, 1/2 inch, followed by 1.25 inch, followed by another 1/2 inch, and then another 1.25 inch, so that at the end of the day, you can create this box frame essentially. So I glued down just that 1/2 inch to, the flooring essentially on my card. And I butt that up right against the score line, being careful not to cross over the score line. And then I'm going to put liquid adhesive just on that 1.25 inch end. So just on that 1.25 inch end. And then I close my card down. And it's going to naturally attach where it needs to in order to pop up, but also in order to close down flatly again. And give that enough time to dry. I'm working with an adhesive that's pretty quick grabbing, and so it doesn't take too long. It's not completely set, but it won't take too long before you can start to kind of move on to the next step. But I just glued my penguin faces to the front of that pop-up mechanism. And then I closed my card because I want to make sure that the card can still close. And that's what it looks like. So you've got a little bit of that extra dimension of the slippers coming forward a little bit. Really, really fun, super easy, quick pop-up card to make. Here's a final look at the 4 cards that I made today. This is my flat card, which features the clear stamp of the month. I just did some white color pencil coloring onto craft color cardstock, and I white heat embossed the sentiment. And my coloring is just a very simple partial coloring at that, but I did use my white gel pen to re-add some definition to those stamped lines. This is my layered card, which features the 3D embossing folder where I've embossed it in green and then tried to go for a very seamless pattern in the gold foil. And the sentiment is from the Better Press of the Month. This is my interactive card, which is a reverse slider, and the sentiment is from the Clear Stamp of the Month. Really, really cute. I really feel like I'm gonna need to do a second version of this where the penguin is completely hidden behind the polar bear. So be on the lookout for that. And then finally, my final card is my pop-up card, which features the small penguin from the small die of the month, and then these fun penguin slippers from the large die of the month. Really, really fun, easy pop-up mechanism to put together, but a very fun card to create. Thanks for joining me for my flip video. I'll leave links to everything in the description box below if you want to check out any of this month's club kits. And until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.